Good afternoon. My name is Jimmy Gassner, and I'm a Community Engagement Associate with the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, State and Local Programs to Advance Home Ownership Opportunity to Narrow Racial Disparities. We are so happy that you can join us for part two of this series, which aims to explore innovative and deliberate strategies for addressing the racial homeownership gap. The first webinar in this series discussed current federal efforts to advance racial equity in home ownership and ways to leverage these new and emerging programs, and it can be viewed in its entirety on philadelphiafed.org. Today, we'll build on that discussion as you will hear from two panels of experts discussing efforts at the state and local level to preserve and expand homebuyers programs while forging new home ownership opportunities for households of color. Next slide. But before we dive into today's discussion, I want to thank our fantastic partners. This series is co-hosted by the Urban Institute and the Penn Institute for Urban Research, and we thank them for their collaboration. Next slide. Additionally, please note that the information, analyses, and conclusions set forth are those of the presenters and do not necessarily represent the views of the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia or the Federal Reserve System. Next slide. And as a final set of housekeeping reminders, please note this webinar is being recorded and the recording and presentations will be posted online shortly after the conclusion of today's event. And furthermore, all audience members will be muted throughout the duration of today's webinar. However, please join today's conversation by submitting questions through the Q&A feature. We'll address as many questions as time permits. And with all that out of the way, it is my pleasure to hand over the program to Yannicka Ratcliffe, Vice President of the Housing Finance Policy Center at the Urban Institute. Yannicka, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jimmy. And I would also like to thank Lei Ding and Teresa and the whole team at the Philadelphia Fed, as well as our other partners, Susan Wachter and the Penn Institute for Research for their collaboration and leadership. Before I launch the panel, I wanted to situate this conversation in a larger and long overdue discussion about racial inequities in home ownership. So we had an event, as Jimmy mentioned, almost 2 months ago about federal initiatives and policies to support closing the racial and ethnic homeownership gaps. And we had a chance to have some robust conversation around those initiatives. So today we're going to be looking at state and local programs. And this next panel is really going to be focusing on those programs that help advance homeownership through bringing more people to home ownership. So with that, let me introduce our illustrious panel. We're going to hear from from Wendy Penn, Associate Vice President at the Mortgage Bankers Association. She's going to talk about some great initiatives they have going. Sarita Battles is the Managing Director and the Head of Community Affordable Lending at Chase. And of course, you can see all this on the slide and read more about their bios online, but we will also be joined by Simone Crawford with the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance, and Ryan Ambrose at the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarita and ask her to talk about how Chase is leaning in on Black and Latino home ownership. And take it away, Sarita.
Well, first of all, thank you so very much for this opportunity. And as you indicated, I am the Managing Director and Head of Community and Affordable Lending at Chase. What's wonderful about this topic is we leaned into this topic and this commitment to close the gap as it relates to the racial wealth gap, particularly among Blacks and Hispanics. And we leaned into this commitment probably, I believe it was in October of 2020. Jamie wanted the company and the firm to be really focused and dedicated to resolving some of the issues and barriers that were impacting Blacks and Hispanics as it relates to wealth creation. I'm on the home lending side of the business, so therefore, we always take that seriously, and it's not just an initiative to us; it is a long-term commitment. And what we understood just going into this space is that we knew that it wasn't going to be a particular program or one specific program that was going to address the needs of Blacks and Hispanics. We knew that it was going to take a multifaceted approach in order to advance homeownership within these communities, as well as with these customers. Secondly, the one other thing that we took into consideration is when you think about this business and when you think about advancing homeownership within Black and Hispanic communities, it is not national. So there's no place called national, it's local. And so as a result of that, we made sure that we started off by building a sound strategy that the entire organization is extremely supportive of, a strategy that can be viewed at the national level, but then also applied and executed locally. And so I love to talk about what we call our 6 pillars of our community and affordable lending strategy. And those 6 pillars really deal with all of the different components that one would need to address in order to lean in and really serve these communities when, where, and how they want to be served. So the first of these 6 pillars is making sure that we're focused on our people. And that is making sure that we are hiring, retaining, and growing a diverse group of people that are in our sales organization, our fulfillment organization, wealth management, just across the board, making sure that we're diversifying our staff to ensure that we're mirroring the markets that we're seeking to serve. And then also not only just mirroring those markets, but making sure that we're hiring folks and retaining folks that are of those communities that we're seeking to serve. So that's number one, is just focusing in on our people. The second component of this is really focusing in on ensuring that we have the right amount of presence in the community. And presence is just not physical presence, but it's also digital presence. As I said before, we want to serve these folks when, where, and how they want to be served. So that requires us to leverage our full sales distribution model to be able to do that. And so whether that's field sales, whether that's centralized or online capabilities, and then also from a correspondent perspective, making sure that we're seeding liquidity back into the market to support those smaller and regional lenders that also have a stretch and a reach in these communities that we're seeking to serve. The third pillar is centered around partnerships, and that is ensuring that we are partnering with those that have key influence in these communities. They have won the trust and consideration from these customers, because I always like to say Chase is a big organization. So therefore we cast a wide net and we catch fish, but we have to be intentional about how we go about doing business, and to not think that partners are critical to this. Partners like realtors, builders, nonprofit organizations, housing counseling organizations, faith-based, community advocacy groups, all of these folks that are in these communities and that have just a focus in growing these communities is important for us to partner with. And so with that, I move into my 4th P, and notice this, this is really around products and programs. I didn't start with that. And I think most often, a lot of lenders and businesses will start with the products and programs and not necessarily address the infrastructure, which I just talked about, people, presence, and partners. That is the infrastructure that will drive the products and programs that you have in the community. So with that said, we have an array of products and programs that we offer from a Chase perspective. Those products and programs address the low to moderate income customer, and it also addresses the affluent, because we can't think that in this particular space that it's just low to moderate Black and Hispanic customers. It is the full economic spectrum that needs help in this particular space. And so therefore we have lots of programs. Some have heard that we've leaned in, and we do have a special purpose credit program that we have launched in the way of providing down payment assistance and or closing costs. And so we decided to do it as a grant that really helps to support the areas where when we think about Blacks and Hispanics, these are their biggest barriers: down payment assistance and source of funds to close. So we decided to offer up a $5,000 grant to support them in that effort. And it's not a grant that you qualify for. It is a grant that the property qualifies for. So we've decided to lean in and provide this in Black and Hispanic communities where they're buying properties. And then obviously, if the property is in that said community, that property would qualify for that $5,000 grant. So we're really excited about leveraging the special purpose credit program to be able to do that. The fifth P is really centered around our promotions, and that is marketing and outreach. And again, most will start in this particular space, but having that infrastructure is important because with marketing and outreach, we can do campaigns, we can do specific events, we can dispel myths, but it is all about winning the trust and considerations of the communities that we're seeking to serve. So leveraging that infrastructure coupled with our products and programs that give them access to credit, and then being in position to market in these communities is extremely important. The last P is one that all of us can really focus in on individually and collectively, and that is policy. So that we know that there are systemic barriers that are preventing Blacks and Hispanics from owning homes and creating wealth. And so therefore, working with our policy center, and then also working with those partners that we have out in those communities to really understand what those barriers are and to make sure that we are coming up with plans, strategies, opportunities to really go to bat on those things that are preventing, number one, wealth creation, number two, really the lack of affordable housing, and then also the lack of credit access. And so obviously those are things that we focus on a day-to-day basis. And so I'll close by just saying this. It is extremely important that we leverage all facets of that strategy in order to capture the business. Because oftentimes we'll have the right products and programs, but if we don't have the right people in the right places to be able to talk about those products and programs, to be able to offer that up so that people can make an informed decision, or to be out in the community so that people know that we are open for business, not just for a certain set or a certain race of people, but for all people. I think if you're really focused in on doing this, it is important that you leverage every aspect of that strategy in order to capture business within these communities. And so I'll leave it there and obviously be available to answer any questions. But again, that is our focus at JP Morgan Chase.
Thank you so much, Sarita. That's I love your quote. There's no such place as national. And talking about the way you have found so many ways to be present through your infrastructure and all the kind of multifaceted ways that your institution is approaching this issue. And now I'm going to turn it over to Wendy Penn with the Mortgage Bankers Association, who is going to, I think, echo some of these themes about the multifaceted aspects and how you can bring those to bear locally. Wendy?
Thank you, Yannicka. I am, for some reason, unable to start a video. I don't know if maybe someone on the back end can do it. I don't have that option. However, while that is happening, I will go ahead and start my comments.
There you go. You're there. We see you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the work that the Mortgage Bankers Association is doing around minority home ownership. Specifically, I want to talk about our convergence place-based initiatives, which are a impact model to increase minority home ownership and close the racial wealth gap. Convergence brings together local stakeholders like lenders, real estate professionals, housing counselors, nonprofit developers, and local government, along with national partners to work together on housing challenges. The goal of Convergence is to close 4 gaps that we have identified that create barriers to homeownership for minorities. The first is the information gap. And that means that all of the incorrect or lack of information that exists, particularly in communities of color, about the buying process. And we all know what those are. It's the myths about needing 1% down or needing perfect credit to purchase a home. The second gap is the trust gap. And that really gets at the heart of some of the challenges with people not trusting the process or the people that are involved in purchasing a home. And that goes back to all of the historic discrimination in the real estate and mortgage banking industry, things like redlining, or even the foreclosure crisis where people saw their families lose their home. And so they self-selected out because they just don't trust the process. The third gap relates to markets, which is housing supply. And so we're looking not only at new development, but also rehab and preservation. And then the fourth gap is resources, and that's the financial programs, down payment assistance, and special mortgage products that are aimed at communities of color. The first convergence location, which is Memphis, Tennessee, was launched in March of 2020. The second location, Columbus, Ohio, launched in July of last year. So we're celebrating that 1-year anniversary this month. And then we're excited that we recently announced that our third city is Philadelphia, and that will launch in early January of next year. So again, the goal is to bring together stakeholders, to share ideas, and to collaborate. And sometimes we find that there are silos within not only in organizations, but also even with industries, like in the counseling industry or with real estate professionals or lenders. And so Convergence tries to break down those silos and get people working together. We want to be we're very intentional about being additive and not duplicative. We know that there is already a lot of great work that's happening in local communities. So our goal is really to bring people together in a way that they might not otherwise. So in each of those locations, Memphis and Columbus that I mentioned, there are about 50 stakeholder organizations represented, and that equates to about 120 people per location that are actively working on these initiatives. And to get the work done, we organize ourselves into work streams. And the work streams might vary a little bit based on location because we really want to be locally specific about the solutions. But some examples of the work streams are programs and products, which can look at the financial opportunities, the mortgage products for buyers, education and outreach, which talks about how we talk about the home buying process, making sure we have the right message and also the right messenger with that information. Preservation and sustainability, housing supply, and education, and research and evaluation. So the work streams meet regularly to discuss the local challenges, their programs and resources, and try to figure out what's missing, what could be enhanced, what could we do a little bit better in each of those areas. So it is very locally driven, even though NBA is the sponsor and we have national level partners. We really just create the framework and allow the partners to do the work, and then we bring resources that they might not otherwise have. So for example, what I mean by that is in Memphis, we're working with a national partner to test out a housing development decision support platform that will help streamline the development process and reduce some of the time that it takes to get permits and some of the costs. And we're targeting that tool at CDCs and small minority developers who are working to put more affordable housing into the ground. So that's a tool that those CDCs or developers might not otherwise have had access to, but through Convergence, we're bringing together resources to have that opportunity. So we're going to test that in Memphis and then tweak it and roll it out into our other locations. Similarly, in Columbus, we're using that area as a place to test out some of our consumer-facing marketing. And working with our partners, the Education and Outreach Workstream is leading an effort to develop a website that will serve as a shared marketing tool for all of our stakeholders, as well as an information portal for potential buyers to learn not just about the home buying process, but also financial health and wellness, because we need to make sure people are truly ready. So not everyone is ready to jump right into pre-purchase counseling. Of course, some people might need a little information about financial health at the front end. We're in the very early stages of planning for Philadelphia, but just based on some of the conversations we're having with stakeholders there, we think one of the tests or one of the pilots we might do might relate to elevating, raising the profile of housing counseling, so people understand better what it is and how it can help them in the process. So each location is a little bit different, but it all operates, under the same spirit of trying to bring together the local stakeholders, support that work, elevate it in some way. The other thing that I'll touch on really quickly that NBA is working on relates to special purpose credit programs. And we just heard Sarita talk about the Chase initiative. So just for context, special purpose credit programs are targeted lending products that are designed to specifically advantage and economically disadvantaged group of people. And so the idea is that they are generated to help a designated group of people. Now, of course, MBA did not create special purpose credit programs, so we are very supportive of them. And they're not something new. They've actually been allowable since the mid-70s as a provision of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. But there's been confusion around them. People weren't completely sure about how they should operate. But thankfully, there's been some regulatory clarity in recent months about special purpose credit programs, starting to see more interest from lenders about them. We work with the National Fair Housing Alliance to create a toolkit on special purpose credit programs for lenders to help them understand them and create a framework for them to develop it. And I think we might touch on that a little bit later this time, but the toolkit kind of explains what they are. It gives examples of some products that are in the field. I think the Chase program is listed on there. So it's something that if you have an interest in learning more about them, then that toolkit is spcptoolkit.com, and I think we'll share that link. But it is something that we are hoping we get a lot of, I'm sorry, I'm getting into the audio is going in and out, I'm not sure. Anyway,
Thank you,
so
Wendy.
sorry, I'm not sure.
I appreciate that. You're breaking up a little bit. Most of it is coming through, but you are a little choppy. So just so everybody knows, it's not their audio. Okay. We're all experiencing it, but hopefully we're getting the main idea. And if I could just say, did you have anything more to add? We really appreciate the way you.
No, that's it.
Good. Thank you. I mean, love the way in which all these facets are being brought. I know most of our audience is really excited to hear about the Philadelphia advent of convergence, and I imagine you'll have some good questions about that. So looking forward to some interesting conversations after each of our panelists go. We're now going to turn more to the community-based organization side of things. And so I wanted to tee up Simone Crawford with the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance. Hi, Simone. You want to talk about your groundbreaking program?
Sure. Thank you, Jenica, and thank you to Philly Fed for convening this session. I'm excited to be here to share our program. I am the Executive Director for the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance, also known as MAHA. We are in the city of Boston, Dorchester to be exact. And MAHA has been in existence for over 36 years. In that time, we have been laser focused on homeownership. We are the entity in Massachusetts that has spent, I think, the most time as a nonprofit really advocating for homeownership opportunities only. Our mission is to educate and mobilize to increase affordable homeownership opportunities, break down barriers facing first-time and first-generation home buyers, and close the racial wealth and homeownership gaps. And this mission is as relevant today as it was with the passing of the Fair Housing Act in 1968. So as we think about Massachusetts in general, well, specifically, but also on a national level, we know that we are faced with the stark realities that for decades, many have been systematically excluded from becoming homeowners. We are seeing this because we're experiencing an ownership rate in Massachusetts where white households are 70% own their own homes, while households of color, such as Blacks, Latinx, and Asian combined, are only at 35%. So that's a 2-to-1 ratio. The average US rate is not good either. So that's something that we really need to take a look at. So this is where this awesome, innovative program called STASH comes in. STASH is an acronym, and it's a first-generation match savings program. The acronym stands for Saving Towards Affordable, Sustainable Homeownership. Now, as a funded partner of Boston Children's Hospital Community Collaborative Initiative, or better known as the Determinant of Health Grant, MAHA was able to launch this race-conscious program in 2019. As previously stated, Massachusetts is one of the worst homeownership and racial wealth gap in the nation, and we need to be intentional about closing these gaps. STASH is playing that role. It has proven so over the past 3 years. First generation home buyers, if we think about it, do not have what we are calling in the bank of mom and dad. STASH can be that resource to level the playing field with those that have intergenerational assets. So for instance, I was fortunate enough to purchase my home in 2004 using a soft second, now called One Mortgage program, that is in this, the state of Massachusetts. But over the years, I noticed, know that my home has appreciated in value, where my three daughters were brought up in this home, and my eldest was able to purchase her own home, utilizing some equity from the home that I purchased. Those people without the bank of mom and dad don't have that. And so this is where Stash is trying to provide this leg up for individuals such as the ones we are providing this funding for. So here's a brief overview of this innovative match savings program. We launched Stash in January of 2019, and we have enrolled a total of 319 participants so far in this program. All enrollees must have graduated from a HUD and CHAPA certified first-time homebuyer class, live in the state of Massachusetts, and intend to purchase in the state of Massachusetts. They must be a first-generation homebuyer, meaning their parents, nor guardian must not have owned a home in their lifetime, or if they did, it was lost due to foreclosure. Now, there's a little gray area here because it can be problematic to really prove that. So what we do within this program is to have individuals that otherwise would not have qualified sign what we are calling a affidavit to say, based on their personal knowledge, their parents did not own. That's how we get over that hurdle. Their also earnings must be at or below the area median income for the county they currently live in. And currently, in today's world, each participant is challenged to save $2,500 of their own funds over a 12-month period, which will enable them to qualify for an additional $5,000 towards the purchase of their first home within the city of Boston. This program is, again, acting as that leg up, that additional funding that they would potentially get from a equity-bearing home should their parents at home. Participants are required to attend 8 one-hour wraparound sessions that teach them how to manage the asset, teach about credit, budgeting, saving, goal setting, insurance, and other needs that you need to become successful homeowners. And these classes are taught within that 12-month period. So as they're saving, they're learning how to, one, acquire this home, but also how to keep it. One of the things that we can put a value on as we go through this process is that we have cohorts, and most of the time cohorts are at 50 for each cohort. Participants within each cohort are able to lean on each other, encourage each other through the process, and help each other to receive and attain their goal of homeownership. And this is very important because if you don't have family members to help you through that process, it can be very daunting and discouraging. But going through the process as a cohort really helps to facilitate the needs that some people have. I'm going to share some data with you as it relates to the demographics of this group so far. We have over, as I stated, 319 participants enrolled. 67% are Blacks or African American, 20% Latinx, 7% multiracial, 4% white, and 2% Asian. So that's a 96% people of color that's enrolled in this program. 82% are female, 65% are female-headed household. We have so far, even during the pandemic and the current homeownership and affordable housing crisis that we're having in this state, where we can't find homes to buy and the prices are really outrageous, we have 44 participants so far that have purchased. We have 3 more that are pending, and we're hoping to enroll another 450 participants over the next year. How we're going to be able to facilitate this is we're currently in a deep advocacy process where we are trying to get this program scale statewide. And so with that, we are hoping to change the match from a 2-to-1 match to a 10-to-1 match, where an individual will save $2,000 and then they'll get a $20,000 grant, not a loan, towards the purchase of their home. And they can use that to actually, either help to pay for the down payment or closing costs, or to pay for minor repairs as they move into their home. I thank you for the opportunity to share our program, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you, Simone. And somebody asked what STASH stands for, and I thought maybe what you could do is actually post a link in the chat with information to the program and more, so people can learn more about it. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, will do.
And then I will, last panelist, but certainly not least, and another locally based, community-based organization. We're going to hear from Ryan Ambrose from Philadelphia.
And thank you. My name is Ryan Ambrose. I am the director of the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative at the Philadelphia Housing Development Corporation. We are a quasi-public agency that does a lot of work on behalf of the city of Philadelphia. Before I got to go into Philly First Home, the Neighborhood Preservation Initiative is a $400 million bond program approved by City Council last year. As the name suggests, a multifaceted program that support many of our existing programs to help maintain homeownership, such as a basic system repairs program, helping to fund the development of affordable rental units, homeless housing, neighborhood infrastructure, support for commercial corridors, and in this case, it is also funding the relaunch of Philly First Home. So Philly First Home is a homebuyer assistance program that it's a grant that will cover $10,000 or 6% of the home's purchase price, whichever is lower, to assist first-time home buyers, reduce the principal, cover the down payment, or closing costs. So we're in what is phase 2 now. Phase 1 launched in June 2019 and ran through July 2020 when funding ran out. That served a little over 2,000 households, and the budget was a little over 24 million. We relaunched in May 2022 using MPI funds. Currently, we are budgeted at 54 million over the next 4 years. It's 14.5 million for the first tranche that City Council took out last year. That figure, of course, we will have to keep an eye on the market and demand. But I can tell you, as of July 5th, we already had 112 applications in various forms of completion. That would equal around a little over $1 million in additional assistance already in the short time that we have been live again. For anybody that might be familiar with Philly First Home in the Philly area, the first phase that was launched in 2019, that was capped at 120% AMI. This phase is capped at 100% AMI. The only reason that went down was because MPI overall is capped at, any program that it supports is capped at 100% AMI. Now, many of our other programs are for lower AMIs, but that was the one major change that Philly First Home had to see in order to receive MPI funding. So for 100% AMI in the city of Philadelphia, that's approximately $105,000 for a 4-person household or $73,000 for a single person. An additional requirements for the program: you cannot have owned a home in Philadelphia in the prior 3 years. And as other panelists have discussed, a very important requirement of Philly First Home is that any participant must first go through housing counseling. And the housing counselor is actually the one that would submit the application while they're working with a potential home buyer through the home buying process. And we don't have a lot of data since we really relaunched phase 2, but as far as phase 1, overall, 58% of participating households were Black, 19% white, 3% were Asian, 17% multiracial, and 26% of the households were Hispanic. And one of the major takeaways that we discovered in phase 1 was Black and Hispanic homebuyers were overrepresented in that group as compared to them being traditionally underrepresented as far as homeownership. So that is a big step towards addressing the racial homeownership gap. Some additional lessons that we've kind of learned. The major change, and it was really more of a streamlining, and I think kind of a lesson that a lot of people learned during the pandemic, is in phase 1, the application process was a lot slower and more cumbersome because it was a traditional paper application. Staff here were translating those documents into one of our computer systems here, and it just really slows down the process. And one of the things that took a little bit of time for us to relaunch was making sure that our new application portal was up and running and functioning. That is specifically for the housing counselors, but now as the housing counselor is sitting there with a potential homeowner, the information that they put into that system automatically feeds straight into our databases. There's no errors, there's no lost data, there's no lost paperwork. And we really are hoping that as this program really gains steam again, and more people in the community find out that it is once again an option, that we are able to serve more households quicker. That's really, it's really kind of the meat and potatoes of what our program is. It's doing it. $10,000, especially for a low-income individual, is a lot of money. Closing costs, I think, for any home buyer, is something that you don't really think of when you're looking at the cost of a house, and it oftentimes is kind of a sticker shock whenever you get to that point. So it's an incredibly helpful program. And I should also mention, just as we are, before I yield the floor, that another program that MPI is going to be helping to fund is a city council initiative called Turn the Key, which will also help buy down the cost of new home ownership projects in the city that are being built on city-owned land. So that's another thing that we are doing to address the home ownership issue, make it easier for lower income individuals to get into a home and start building that equity, and hopefully stay in their own communities.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and all of our panelists. And now we'll have a little conversation between ourselves, and then we'll leave a little bit of time, because I do see some strong questions coming in from the audience. So I was going to start by picking up the topic of special purpose credit programs. We talked about this briefly in our last event, and it came up again today. Sarita described Chase's program, and Wendy talked about a new toolkit that the MBA has. So I think I want to kind of first turn it over to maybe Simone and Ryan to sort of hear from a really local, on the ground standpoint. What is it that you feel like local organizations need to know about the opportunity, and how to leverage and broaden it, and chime in on any experience you're having? Like, are you seeing them take root in your communities? And then I will invite, Sarita and Wendy to chime in as well if they have anything to add. So Simone and Ryan, any experiences with special purpose credit programs?
I am not able to start my video, and ask the host to help me. Thanks. I'm just going to jump in here, Ryan. I know you're on screen, but I am in the learning phase here with special purpose credit programs. We have our One Mortgage program, which is a statewide program that provides one of the best mortgages in the state of Massachusetts to low and moderate income individual at 100% area median income or below. And one of the things that I think is a barrier to allowing lenders to offer more of this is the fact that these are portfolio mortgage loans, and so they have to stay on the lender's books until for the life of the loan, or if it's refinanced. And my main aim here today, as I am sharing, is to also learn how and if special purpose credit program could assist in kind of like helping to get lenders to be relieved from having to hold these type of mortgages on their books.
That's a really great example of how the local can connect to the national, and how we need to keep those lines open. Ryan, what are you seeing?
Well, I would say I'm also still in the learning phase, but I think important thing to note about Philly First Home is we're helping with the closing costs and those fees that come along with buying the home, but the homeowners and participants are still needing to go out into the private market and secure their own mortgage. So anything that help groups that are traditionally obviously underrepresented in home ownership, faced years of discrimination in the past by lending institutions and weren't able to get access to that credit, always going to be helpful. And that's having strong partners that are willing to work in those communities is it's essential for our program to work.
So I think you both speak for probably for many people about being on a learning curve, especially at the local level. And so, yes, Sarita and Wendy are both great teachers here. Chase is really leading the way. And of course, the toolkit from the MBA is another important teaching moment. So maybe you guys could chime in at this point.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and first off mention the toolkit that the MBA does have. And hopefully before the end of this webinar, we could provide the link to that toolkit. I think it's very informative. It also gives examples of certain types of special purpose credit programs. Not every special purpose credit program has to reside on the lender's balance sheet or portfolio. It depends on how you utilize it and leverage it. So I think that toolkit provides several examples. And I would say from a Chase perspective, we know that we have various different opportunities to do a special purpose credit program. Our first initiative was really to focus on the grant piece because we knew the two biggest barriers as it pertains to Black and Hispanic homeownership, not just low to moderate income, was that wealth gap, which is not having enough for down payment assistance or not having enough for closing costs. And so therefore we did it in the form of a grant. And so as a result of that, it's available on any of our products with the exception of our jumbo loans, which are portfolio loans. So again, from a conventional standpoint, it's available on all products and it's sellable. So again, because it was leveraged as a grant. But there are other ways in which we could leverage special purpose credit programs. And so I know one of the things that we're doing is we're looking at other opportunities. Is it in pricing that you want to be able to leverage that? Is it access to credit? So do we change certain aspects of our credit policy to be able to provide that? But I think the one thing that is important when anybody is thinking about leveraging a special purpose credit program is understanding the data. Because one responsibility that we have when we leverage those types of programs is making sure that we measure, that we monitor, and ensure that the beneficiaries of that special purpose credit program, that they receive it. And so that's another component that a lender has to think about because you have to operationalize this from a standpoint of being able to track the business that you're doing, to measure the effectiveness of the business. Is it doing what it needs to do in those particular areas? And so for our special purpose credit program or the grant, I have to look at that from a national perspective and local because every market is different. And so therefore I have to measure, being that we're doing it based on geography, not because of a person's income or because of a person's assets or anything like that. We're literally looking at it and applying it based on geography. So as a result of that, one of the things that I have to measure against is gentrification. So again, it's a lot of things that you have to look at. And what we try to do is make sure that 50% or more of Blacks and Hispanics are receiving this grant program. If we have a market where that's not happening, then that's an opportunity for us to peel back the onion, look at our strategy. So do we have the right people in the right places with the right partners, really driving and creating insights about this program that we have? It's not that the program is not working. It might be that we just don't have the right infrastructure in place to ensure that it works. So again, it's a lot of data. It's a lot of measuring success. And then just ensuring that the folks that you are looking to receive this special purpose credit program, that they are receiving it.
Thank you, Sarita. And Wendy, did you want to add anything about where people who are trying to get educated about them can start?
Yes, and I will say I must have gremlins in my Zoom today because I have not been able to restart my camera. Hopefully you can hear me okay. But yes, the toolkit, I did drop the link earlier and I will do that again in just a moment. But the toolkit is a great place to start if you're looking to learn about special purpose credit programs. It does give some information, kind of the background of it, and information on why they are permissible, even though, like, as I mentioned earlier, they've been an option since the 70s. And I did want to touch a little bit on what Simone asked about lenders having to leave them on portfolio. And I'm sure Sarita could probably, not probably, could speak more eloquently about it than me, but one of the things, the toolkit does address that question about whether or not a lender, if it's available to the GSEs, and whether or not a variance is needed if they want to do that. And the toolkit does have an FAQ section, and it mentions that a variance is not required if the program already fits the credit box for the GSEs. Essentially, the lender might be able to take off some of their overlays and make the program fit. If there is an expansion or a change of the credit box or includes a feature that's not currently allowed, then a variance would be, you'd have to request a variance in order to be able to sell it on the secondary.
Thank you very much, Wendy. We do have some very strong audience questions coming in, as I mentioned. I wanted to encourage people to check and see. There was a good question about valuation, which Sarita has really given a good answer to. And in the last event, we talked about the PAVE initiative at the federal level to deal with that. So I might refer you to that. I'm really intrigued by a question about how we hear a lot at the local level about down payment assistance programs. It's clearly a key piece of closing racial and ethnic homeownership gaps because of the lack of ability that's been afforded these families to build intergenerational wealth because of having been, limited from being able to access homeownership in past generations. And that kind of continues on. But the question is, how can those who offer down payment assistance be connected with lenders who accept them? There seems to be a gap or a delta in organizations offering down payment assistance programs and lenders not accepting them. And I think that that's a pretty broad problem. So I'd love to hear the audience chime in on it. The panel chime in. Anyone want to start us off there? Simone, how do you do it? You've got this great first generation program that is really explicitly aimed at closing this gap caused by intergenerational lack of access to credit and home ownership. How do you get lenders and involved and borrowers taking it up?
It's by consistently repeating yourself and making sure that the program starts to gain recognition. One of the fortunate thing about STASH is the fact that the city of Boston, the mayor of Boston, the former mayor of Boston, Mayor Marty Walsh, saw how viable this program was and how impactful it was to the community and invested heavily in it. And so with the city of Boston investing in it, a lot of our partner lenders whom we already had relationship with, we were able to kind of use those relationships to educate these lenders about this new down payment assistance program. And so it was a little bit more of an easier process to have them accept the STASH program as a part of the down payment and assistance program available in the city.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that down payment assistance?
Yeah. The one thing that I would say, I'm sorry, Wendy, I was just going to say the only thing that I would say is that partnerships are extremely important when you're working with housing finance agencies or nonprofits that are offering those things. And so anytime that we can come together and partner, that be by way of training, making sure that the loan officers are trained on those programs, making sure that the housing finance agency understands that we are doing everything possible to talk about those programs and create awareness. But then there can also be activities that are done where we could do or be a part of home buyer education and counseling activities or first-time home buyer seminars where we're talking about those programs, because one of the biggest issues, particularly within Black and Hispanic communities, is that they're just not aware of the programs that are out there. Sometimes our loan officers are not even aware of the programs that are out there. And one thing that I would say is that these programs are local in scope. And so from a loan officer perspective or a lender perspective, it's important that the loan officers that we have, they have to be trained on multiple programs. So when the housing finance agencies have variation in their offerings, right? And this is where people have to be subject matter experts. But when there's variations in the offering and you have to keep taking it off the assembly line and putting it on another because it's a different program, it makes it harder for lenders to be able to either get those programs approved, be able to execute against those programs and talk about it. Because again, people have to be very knowledgeable. because it's local in scope. So that's the one thing I would say that's the challenge, but the opportunity is the partnership, the training, the learnings, the insights that we can all get and be able to offer up to these customers so that they can make a wise decision about home ownership.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, we are almost out of time, so I'm going to tee up a couple of questions that I feel like relate to that, and each panelist can just take a half a minute to sort of answer the question as best as the one they really want to speak to. We have one question that relates to this, which is competition from investors, because if you're coming with a down payment assistance program or even just an FHA loan, it's harder to compete with cash buyers for properties, and I'm sure you're all seeing that locally. And so if you have anything to say about that. And then another interesting question that was raised that we could have a whole other session on is the impact of homeownership on a macro level on communities and anything you're trying to do to build in permanent affordability. So I'll leave both of those out there for each of you to take a quick swing at. And we'll go in the order that we did our, we'll go in backwards order that we've done the panel. So Ryan, you first, and then Simone, and then Wendy, and then Sarita.
I think, really one of the things, I guess, about investing in communities, and, one of the things that we've found, I'm kind of answering your question, but I'm probably not overall, but we're finding in our at least in phase one, that over 60% of participants stayed relatively close to their neighborhood of origin. And these are neighborhoods of low risks of the displacement. And I think that's a very important thing because they are investing, this is neighborhoods that they are familiar with, that they might have kids in the schools, and they're investing in their own community where they have been. And they're laying down roots and building wealth there. And I think that's, an important thing. I'm not addressing kind of how do you get the cash and, how do you compete with the all cash investors? But I think the big thing is these are neighborhoods with low risk of displacement where that's not currently happening. It might in the future, but, programs like this that are helping people get established in a community where there's, they're not likely to sell an all cash offer. And I think, unrelated to this down payment assistance program, one of the programs that I mentioned that is also funded by MPI is the basic system repair program that we also run. And that is a program that helps homeowners do basic system repairs to help them stay in their homes. And another one is the adaptive modification program, which does modifications like ramps and other type of things to houses to help older residents or people with disabilities stay in their homes. And that is really a way to help stabilize the neighborhood and kind of fend off those investors that are trying to come in and prey on those type of homeowners.
Thank you. Simone, last words.
Just two things. I'm going to just address the cash buy-in. One of the things I think we need to do is to try to educate our current home buyers that are selling about the impact that, selling to cash buyers has on the community. Maybe through having some of these, our nonprofit, having info sessions to teach our homeowners about selling to local first home participants or individuals that are looking for home. Second thing is we have been really toying with the idea of competing with these cash buyers ourselves as a nonprofit by walking in with cash and individuals who are interested in the homes and making the offer on these individuals on behalf to kind of compete for our individuals that are being priced out. So Great. There's a lot of fleshing out to do, but those are the two things I think we should try to do.
More innovation. Thank you. Wendy, any last quick thoughts?
I will just say, I think Simone's examples are great. No question, cash buyers, that's a tough situation, especially when you have a buyer who is not in a position to waive contingencies and all that sort of thing. But I think really, I think the solutions, as she said, are really locally based and really getting all who are involved to work together to address the challenges.
Thank you, Wendy, and thanks for struggling through your tech problems. We appreciated your being here. Sarita, if you want to take us out, and then we can make way for the next panel.
Yep, and I was typing it into the system, but I would say one of my recommendations is to address this from a policy perspective. I think that's the only way it's going to be addressed individually and collectively. We have to go to policymakers and talk about having a first look program for homes that are up for sale that may possibly be 90 to 120 days, where you give that home, where you give that opportunity to someone that's going to be a primary residence before you offer that up to an investor that's going to do cash. So those are the types of things that I think about, but this is I feel like it's more of a policy issue that we all have an opportunity to address.
Well, thank you all. It's been a great panel, a great first discussion, and I'm going to turn it back over to Lei to tee up our second panel.
Thank you, Yannicka, and all the panelists, I think, in the first panel for such a great panel discussion. Now, I think we want to switch the gear a little bit. I think so to focus on the preservation of existing homeownership. Basically, I think the idea is, with the decline in affordability, and especially, various challenges for existing homeowners, we believe, the preservation of existing homeownership for household of color, it's equally important compared, to expanding access to homeownership. First of all, especially, many homeowners of color, they have difficulty in making their monthly mortgage payment. This is prime because they're generally more vulnerable to macroeconomic changes. At the same time, they are facing lots of other related housing costs, such as home repair, property taxes, and other related housing costs. So in this panel, we will focus on all these issues. Our first panelist, will be Melanie Walter, from New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency. She will discuss, several important homeowner assistance programs that are designed to help vulnerable homeowners and also, more disadvantaged communities. Now, I just hand this over to Melanie.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about what we're all confronting in our workplaces these days. Everyone here is aware that regional home prices have skyrocketed, and that's why people are so interested in this topic. Pandemic-related market disruptions like increased demand and rising building costs are placing other supply constraints in the housing market beyond just the rush of people trying to get into new housing during the pandemic period. Even with a general understanding of how significant those disruptions have been, some of the numbers are startling as we're starting to see what's coming out in the past year or so. The average sales price of a single family home rose 23% between 2020 and 2021, and then another 9.8% from 2021 to 2022. What this means is that the same house that cost $411,000 in 2020 is now going for $557,000. With no other change to the market around us, the interest rates and otherwise, that alone takes a tremendous number of people who would have been able to buy into a starter home or a mid-sized family home completely out of the market. Right now, the average percent of list price that's being received when a sale is closed is over 100% of the list price. Traditionally, you'd expect people to go in, make an offer of 10%, 15% below, negotiate a little bit, maybe close in that 5 to 8% below listing. Right now, it takes about 102.4% of list price to close a sale. And that's typically with waived contingencies, much larger down payments than you traditionally see. So the level of pricing out that's happening is significant. Further compounding factors, inventory has been low. It's down another 22.3% in the past year, and it had already dropped more than 10% during the pandemic. The limited supply of homes coupled with high demand is just putting homeownership so far out of reach for everyday Americans. There are currently over 125,000 households just in New Jersey that are homeownership ready, meaning they have the credit, they have the income and the down payment to support a home purchase, but they're stymied by these market conditions. Record levels of investor purchases are further tightening the availability of starter homes. Newark and Trenton, New Jersey are actually experiencing the highest rates of investor home purchases in the nation right now. Combined with rising interest rates, we're now seeing anticipated mortgage payments on the same houses that are 40% higher than they were just in March of this year. And meanwhile, people's rents are rising. New Jersey rents have gone up 32.86% year over year. Not only is this home purchase then or home retention for a renter a challenge, we're also starting to see a higher rate of foreclosures. Across New Jersey right now, 1 in every 3,438 houses is facing foreclosure. That number is closer to 6,600 nationally. So in this challenging market environment, my organization, the New Jersey Housing and Mortgage Finance Agency, in partnership with Governor Murphy and our Lieutenant Governor Oliver, have advanced unprecedented state investment in new affordable housing development, as well as in homeownership creation and preservation. The reason that we've had to develop a number of programs is because there are so many different prongs of this issue. This is a systemic challenge. It isn't a single incident. It isn't a single market condition. So we need to take a multi-pronged approach to successfully meet the needs of historically disadvantaged homeowners and low and moderate home buyers, because they just have a much higher level of need than we traditionally see. There's really 4 challenges that we see as critical to be addressed in any program that we're rolling out to try to meet these needs. First, current home buyers or current homeowners, are being displaced due to foreclosure or because they can't afford to maintain their current home. Second, institutional investors are buying up housing stock. This is blocking new home buyers, and it's also causing some deterioration and disinvestment in the communities, because when you transition from homeownership to rental, the landlords aren't often living in that community, so they don't worry as much about the sidewalk, the streetlights, and the schools. Current homeowners are also seeing the loss of equity in some places, because where their neighborhood is experiencing a decline as a result of lost equity or foreclosures, they're then losing the equity that they put in. This is particularly challenging in areas where you have a lot of people buying in with a 3.5% or 5% down payment, because for every house within about 200 feet of a house that goes into foreclosure, they're immediately seeing a roughly 2.5% reduction in home value. So we've basically wiped the value of their down payment off the table when one house on their street goes into foreclosure. New home buyers are also being forced to buy for so much more than normal, which means that our 4th issue is that they can't compete with those cash buyers. And so for them to be able to get enough of a bump to get in and to beat them out in price, that means that they're kind of coming into a situation where they're less likely to have and retain equity coming in the door and in the next several years, particularly if the market takes a turn. With that context, we know we have 4 challenges to address. I'm going to walk you through 4 programs that give you some ideas about things that can be done to help meet those different needs. First is a very large program that's been supported financially by the federal government using the Homeowner Assistance Fund. We have IRMA, which is an Emergency Rescue Mortgage Program. We received about $326 million from the HAF program, and we've committed the vast majority of that to direct mortgage relief through the IRMA program. We then also set aside about $10 million for complementary housing counseling interventions, which I'll get to a little bit later. Key facets in the design of this program that helped us to target the needs of the communities that we serve were to target the highest need areas within our community through analytics. We had the opportunity to use targeted micro area level data that was provided by the Fed, for which we were very appreciative. We also emphasized the importance of covering not only back mortgage payments, but other liens that reflect a level of heightened home foreclosure risk. If you're not paying your water bill, usually that's first a very strong sign that there's significant distress, because people don't let their water get shut off if they don't have to. And second, that's something that can accrue at $200 or $300 a month, but you go a year without paying that, you're not going to be able to get caught up. They're going to shut off your water, and they put a lien on your house. So now you could be losing your house over that $2,000 or $3,000 bill. So making sure that our program accounted not just for back mortgage payments, but for those kinds of liens was critical to our program design. We've also defined hardship to include extraordinary COVID-related expenses. One of the things that we heard very early in the pandemic was it wasn't just people losing their income. They now had to pay for additional childcare. Their commuting costs went up. Some families that we'd heard from had multiple COVID-related funerals because everyone in the house got sick at the same time. Several people died. Those are extraordinary expenses that can set families back on their heels that would otherwise have been able to continue to make those payments. Now they just need relief, and they'll be able to stabilize. Finally, we also allowed for a 4-month prospective payment period to help people stabilize and get back on their feet. This program design has proven very successful at achieving our LMI and disadvantaged community targets. Next slide, please. More than 5,000 applications have been received so far. We have 850 that have completed review, 1,200 that have been referred to counselors for additional intervention, and 500 loans currently in underwriting. Our average award under the program is a little over $19,000, and we've awarded roughly $5.42 million so far. Of this amount, we see about $3.8 million that's actually being dedicated for those prospective monthly payments, while a smaller amount is basically being used for catch-up payments. So we're seeing a continuing level of distress that's actually higher than we anticipated when we initially designed the program. And we've been very thankful that we have that funding available to help support people as they continue to transition back. 89% of our awardees have a household income that is at or below 100% of their county AMI. So that alone is a pretty high level. But what we find particularly interesting about the results that we're seeing is that the average award recipient earns about 45% of their respective county AMI. So our average recipient is earning about $40,000 a year and below 50% of the average in their community. Additionally, 72% of our award recipients are meeting the federal Treasury's socially disadvantaged definition, and that far exceeds the minimum federal thresholds. Part of this is because we are seeing a high level of participation in our micro area targets. 26% of our applicants are coming specifically from targeted areas, and that really outpaces the statewide rate of need. We're seeing only about 15% of the statewide need reflected in those communities, but 26% of our applications and program participants are coming in from our target areas. So that program design has really borne out. We're doing a reevaluation as we reach that 6-month mark with the program to make sure that there's nothing that needs to be further refined. But we've been very pleased to see that our targeting and adding in things like liens, prospective payments, and neighborhood level targeting helped us to reach the communities that most needed our help. The next program that I'd like to discuss is our foreclosure mediation assistance program. As mentioned above while talking about IRMA, we've utilized a network of participating housing counseling agencies throughout our state. We have specific agencies in each county. Counseling is available and can be provided remotely. We've also assisted thousands of families with foreclosure prevention, counseling, and identifying and navigating options, including the applications for the programs that we have available and providing soft landings should those options not prove sufficient to save people's homes. In this program, the critical thing that I would point out is that we've been working with the courts and the judiciary to route cases and to prevent foreclosures from proceeding while families are working with us on these different options. The courts have been a vital partner because foreclosures aren't just progressing if there's another option available. And the banks and servicers have been really receptive to working with us and the courts to achieve these outcomes. So that's something that is markedly different from what was observed in prior crises. Just to give you an idea of the successes, we've been able to assist over 4,000 families through the FMAP housing counseling program. And historically, this intervention has resulted in about 65% of our homeowners remaining in their homes. Just a quick overview of the last two programs that I'd like you to have a little bit of exposure to. The next is the Foreclosure Prevention Act, and then I'll go on to Healthy Homes. Both of these are community or neighborhood level interventions that are helping people to retain homeownership and also helping to ensure that neighborhoods remain properly developed, maintained, and that homeownership remains a viable option and isn't all going over to investor-owned rentals. New Jersey is one of the most highest foreclosure rates in the country pretty consistently because we have very high home values. So to be able to get into the house, to be able to maintain your mortgage payment just requires a high level of income, and that can be a real challenge. So our legislature authorized a permanent direct revenue stream for the state of New Jersey that allows us to invest in purchasing foreclosed properties notes to allow us to do a combination of things. First, investing in high risk, high investor purchase neighborhoods. We can target vacant properties so that we can redevelop those, rehab them, and remarket them with a priority for low and moderate income home buyers. and then also to allow us to purchase occupied homes notes to try to modify those mortgages and help people retain their home. And where that's not possible, to help them have the opportunity to find a softer transition so that they don't take the credit impact, things like cash for keys or a short sale, where they wouldn't have that opportunity with the bank. We anticipate being essentially 3 times as likely to keep someone in their home in those interventions than a traditional bank would be. And so our objective is to really help families keep the houses, and where that's not possible, to remarket them specifically for low and moderate income home buyers. A final note on Healthy Homes Initiative is that it supplements and expands upon our award-winning and nationally recognized hospital partnership program. It expands from the single new affordable supportive housing property that we've built to help us work with anchor institutions to identify areas of need and take on maintenance and upgrade projects to help current residents stay in their homes. Through these programs, my team at NJHMFA has taken substantial steps to address numerous factors that influence the loss of homeownership and to preserve and create new homeownership opportunity. We anticipate need will remain high based on the numbers that we talked about at the beginning. And so these programs are being built to help adapt to meet community needs where and while they persist. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie. I think for introducing all these very interesting programs, and the people may have some questions about this one, but for the sake of time, let me introduce, I think, the second speaker, Stephanie Moulton, I think from Ohio State University. Actually, I think she will discuss a very unique home repair program in Ohio.
Hi, thanks. So I'm excited to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about an initiative called Power of Home that we've been able to launch here in Ohio in partnership with Ohio State University, as well as the Ohio Housing Finance Agency. So sort of the agency that's similar to Melanie's agency in New Jersey, we've partnered with here in Ohio, and then a group called Framework Homeownership. And then we've received some philanthropic investment as well. So I just want to start with a story, and I think that this really ties into the first panel and the second panel. So this is an actual picture of one of the homeowners in Ohio who was able to buy her home through Ohio's affordable mortgage program. She actually was able to get substantial down payment assistance to get into homeownership. First generation homeowner, had about $50,000 in income, had no savings, and was able to get into a home, a major success story. But then about a year after buying the home, her hot water heater broke, and she didn't have any savings buffer. And so she was forced to charge it to her credit card. And then the credit card bill started racking up at 18% interest. And she ended up finding herself struggling to make her monthly payments, not only on her credit card, but also her mortgage. And these types of stories weren't unusual. This is actually a pretty common story we were hearing after purchase. And so this really motivated us to think about the racial wealth gap, not just about getting people into homes, but also about how do we help homeowners after we've helped them kind of overcome that hurdle, get down payment assistance, get into that home. How do we help them kind of maximize the wealth in their home and actually be able to thrive in their homes? And a big part of that we've learned is about access to the ability to repair and maintain the home. Next slide. So this is just a little bit of data on the homeowners that are in Ohio's HFA program. So this is about 20,000 homeowners in Ohio's program that purchased homes since 2015. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of stats on them from the data that we have. About half have incomes below 80% AMI, but that means about half have incomes above 80% AMI. And those of you that work in the affordable housing space know that the 80% AMI is sort of a magic number. So if you're at 80% or below area median income, you can often qualify for a lot of grant and loan programs that might help with things like home repairs. Particularly if you have very low income, you might qualify for those things. But if you're above 80% AMI, but you're just above it, so to qualify for these mortgage programs for purchase, you have to be below 115% of area median income. So in this case, she was at about, I think, 90% of area median income, but she made too much money to qualify for a lot of these repair programs that might be out there in her neighborhood. At the same time, the average homeowner had an average of $1,200 in savings. The median is actually 0 in savings among these homeowners in the first year after purchase. And they also, in their first year after purchase, we saw that they have an increase in credit card debt of about $1,300. Some of that's associated with buying things for the new home, but some of it's associated with expenses that come up because many of these homeowners are buying older homes. So one of the things we know, and actually Urban has a really nice paper on this that they put out in 2020 about racial disparities in home ownership, not just purchasing homes, but also among homeowners, that we find that Black homeowners often purchase older homes. They often purchase homes because they need to get a home that's at that right purchase price. Oftentimes they may be homes that are in need of home repairs. And so while they can get into the home, that home may be more likely to have things go wrong in the first couple of years. And if they don't have the savings cushion, then they're kind of in this vicious cycle. In a study by University of North Carolina, they found that 48% of first-time home buyers, first-generation home buyers, had a major unexpected repair need of $2,000 or more within the first 2 years after home purchase. We also know from our data that about 80% of borrowers in these affordable mortgage programs fail to refinance with interest rates drop. And they're also paying 3 times more in energy costs as a share of their income than wealthier homeowners. And a lot of that comes back to, again, buying older homes that may not have the same types of insulation and efficient windows and things like that that other programs have. Next slide. So we partnered with, again, Framework Homeownership, which is a nonprofit housing counseling kind of group that provides online education and tools to help people buy homes. But we all partnered with them to create a resource for people after they close on their home. And so the idea was to create a resource for new homeowners that they could actually find at their fingertips access to home repair grants and loans, as well as financial coaching if they needed it after closing. We know that there's a lot of grant and loan programs out there. Many nonprofits, probably many of you who are watching today, have some really cool programs, but they're specific to a local community. They're specific to a specific city or a county or a zip code. They have specific income requirements. They may do weatherization and nothing else. They may do things for elderly, but nothing else. And it was just very confusing and a difficult maze for people to navigate. So we've cataloged about 500 of these programs in Ohio. And basically you enter in your zip code and you can find all the programs within a 25-mile radius of you. But you can also figure out if you might qualify for these based on your income. And then what we found is a lot of our individuals aren't qualifying for these because they might be over the eligibility requirements. And so that led us to create, together with Huntington Bank and Ohio Housing Finance Agency, we've created a new loan program for home repairs. Next slide. So this is just, and again, there's probably things like this elsewhere. In fact, we patterned our program after Minnesota Housing Finance Agency has a similar home repair program. Their program was funded with government dollars. Ours, we tried to do a mix of philanthropic, private dollars to make this more of a sustaining revolving loan pool that could live on over time. So for this program, what we've done is we've created an unsecured loan product. It was really important that we make it unsecured. So a lot of the home repair grants and loans you might find out there are going to be secured against the home. And what that means is that if you already have a high loan to value ratio on your home, maybe you owe $200,000 and the home is worth $210,000, you often can't qualify for many of these programs because it would push you up over, you'd end up owing more in the home than it was worth. We didn't want to put our homeowners in that situation. And so we created an unsecured product that basically isn't a lien against the house. And it's only for up to $10,000. So it's a very small amount of money, but it's unsecure. And usually you're going to pay, upwards of 18% interest on a credit card for this type of an unsecured loan, maybe 7, 8, 10, 12% on a personal loan for this type of a product. We were able to get the interest rate down to 3.99%, and that's a fixed interest rate, by setting up something called a loan loss reserve. And basically what that means is that we take about a $500,000 investment that we received, and instead of giving it as a grant fund, we set it up as a loss reserve so that we can offset the risk to Huntington Bank of making these loans. And they are able to charge a much lower interest rate, 3.99%, because our loss reserve is there in case somebody defaults. We're going to help cover that using the loss reserve. If somebody doesn't default, though, we get to keep the money in the loss reserve and keep making more loans to individuals. And it lets us create a more affordable product than what you might get in the market. And so this is just an example. We have some credit score requirements right now, 640 or above. We go up to 115% AMI. So one of the goals for this product was to try to create something for that missing middle. A lot of the grant loan programs cover up to 80%. We wanted to cover that missing middle here. Right now, this is only available in Ohio to Ohio homeowners. But we see this as a model. We've actually been talking with Convergence about thinking about this as a model that could be expanded in other places. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. Our last but not least speaker, Adam, I think, Lanley from Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, will discuss some property tax relief programs for homeowners. Yeah. Now.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be here today to speak with you about property tax relief for homeowners and specifically how targeted tax relief can help vulnerable homeowners stay in their homes. As we all know, property taxes can be a significant part of total housing costs, and many people are worried right now about the potential for growing property tax burdens to push longtime homeowners out of their homes. We've heard stories about vulnerable homeowners in gentrifying neighborhoods, people who have owned their homes for decades and whose property taxes might have doubled in the past 5 years, despite the fact that those homeowners continue to live in a modest home on a modest income. Or maybe they lost their job and they're suddenly struggling with their property taxes. Of course, nobody wants one bad break to spiral into losing their home. But the good news is that there are proven solutions to address those issues and other common challenges with the property tax. And the best options provide meaningful tax relief while also maintaining the strengths of the property tax. And that's really critical because fiscally healthy local governments, those that can provide quality public services for their residents, they really need a well-functioning property tax system. The property tax really is the linchpin of local government, and it accounts for roughly half of all revenue raised by localities. And that heavy reliance makes sense because the property tax is a particularly stable revenue source. It's progressive compared to most other revenue options available to localities. It's a very efficient tax, and it has many other key strengths. But that said, like any tax, it has its challenges. So to help policymakers craft effective property tax relief, policies that address the challenges with the tax without undermining its strengths, I recently co-authored a report on the subject that is freely available on the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy's website. And we'll work to get a link to that report in the chat. And in that report, we evaluate more than a dozen common approaches to property tax relief. And we recommend a package of policies that together will promote a tax system that is fair and affordable for taxpayers, while also providing the revenue needed for quality public services. But instead of trying to cover the full suite of recommendations today, I'm going to focus in on two related challenges. First, how to help homeowners whose properties are rapidly appreciating, especially lower income homeowners in gentrifying neighborhoods. And second, how to help homeowners facing the heaviest property tax burdens relative to their incomes. And as I'll explain, the way to address those challenges is twofold. First, it's essential to reduce tax rates when property values rise rapidly to stabilize tax bills. And second, it's necessary to provide targeted property tax relief with so-called circuit breakers, deferrals, and homestead exemptions. So first, to help homeowners in communities with rapid housing appreciation, the first step is straightforward. Policymakers need to reduce tax rates. Perhaps the most common misperception about property taxes is that rising home values inherently mean rising tax bills. But in fact, in most communities, the property tax levy, it works kind of like a residual fund that supports the part of the budget that is not covered by other revenue sources. So unlike the income tax and the sales tax, where the rates are set in statute and don't change very often, property tax rates are adjusted regularly to bring in the desired amount of revenue given the level of property values. So if spending is stable, then property tax rates will be cut when property values rise. And you can see that by looking at recent data on home values and property taxes. In the past 2 years, home values have grown nearly 40%, but property tax collections have only grown 8%. That's less than the rate of inflation and far less than growth in other taxes. So that implies that most jurisdictions with rapidly growing property values are in fact cutting their property tax rates so that tax bills remain fairly stable. So cutting rates when values rise is very important. But that said, even if the citywide property tax levy is stable overall because of flexible rate setting, there will still be some homeowners who face excessive property tax burdens. And that's why it's so important to provide targeted property tax relief. And the most cost-effective approaches are circuit breakers, deferrals, and to a lesser extent, homestead exemptions. So let me explain how those work. First, circuit breakers target property tax relief to households paying the highest share of their income in property taxes. Seniors on fixed incomes, workers who lost their jobs, low-income homeowners in gentrifying neighborhoods, etc. And specifically, circuit breakers set a threshold percentage of income that property taxes must exceed before tax relief is available. And then above that threshold, the circuit breaker benefit kicks in and offsets property taxes above that level. So for example, under a 5% threshold circuit breakers, taxpayers would receive a credit equal to the amount by which their property tax bill exceeds 5% of their income. And another promising approach for property tax relief are property tax deferrals. With these programs, homeowners can apply to defer payment of their property taxes until their home is sold or the owner dies. And at that point, the full amount of deferred taxes are due, typically with interest added. So deferrals directly address the liquidity problem faced by homeowners who are housing rich, but income poor, by allowing them to tap their home equity to pay current property taxes. And these programs work similarly to reverse mortgages, except they usually have lower interest rates and significantly lower fees. And a third option for property tax relief is to adopt a generous flat dollar homestead exemption, say exempting the first $30,000 in property value from taxation. While homestead exemptions are not as cost effective as circuit breakers or deferrals, they're simple to administer, they make the property tax more progressive, and they can provide substantial tax relief for lower income homeowners. Finally, I'd be remiss if I did not caution against tax limits, especially assessment limits. These are tax limits are a common response to growing property values, and they may have some intuitive appeal, but in fact, lots of research shows that tax limits are generally a poor way to provide property tax relief. And limits on growth and assessed values have particularly severe unintended consequences. They shift the tax burden towards poor neighborhoods and towards owners whose home values are growing the slowest. They also create large disparities in tax bills for owners of similar properties, and their lock-in effect can reduce the supply of affordable starter homes. So to recap, while the property tax has many strengths as a local revenue source, it's very important to implement targeted property tax relief measures to address specific challenges, while avoiding overly broad measures that can cause serious unintended consequences. And to help homeowners whose property values are rapidly appreciating, or who face particularly heavy tax burdens, two things are needed. First, policymakers need to reduce tax rates when property values are rising rapidly. And second, it's necessary to provide targeted property tax relief with circuit breakers, deferrals, and homestead exemptions. And as I said, equally important is to avoid tax limits, especially assessment limits. So thank you for your attention, and I'd be happy to have any discussion.
Yeah, thank you, I think, Adam. Sorry that we are almost out of time, but I think I just want to give each of you, I think, the opportunity to make a final remark after, I think, hearing other people's presentation. Maybe I think 30 seconds or at most 1 minute for each of you. I think anything to add? How about to start from you, Stephanie? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. No, I think there were some great questions about how do we think there was a question about what's the default rate, for example, on these types of home repair programs. I think that I'm not sure if that's directed at Melanie or me. Melanie, do you have a home repair program?
We don't. The state of New Jersey does, but it's housed in the Department of Community Affairs.
Okay, yeah. And I think right now we don't have any defaults in our program, but it's brand new. I think Minnesota Housing has been able to have a relatively low rate of default as well. So just trying to answer that question. But I think it also, again, the loss reserve is set up to help kind of cover some of that default. But I think the more we can think about creative solutions on the back end and not just the front end, I think a lot of folks focus on getting people into homes. And what I love about, what we're talking about here is we're also focusing on what to do after people buy homes in order to break down those racial wealth gaps. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah. Hi, Melanie, I think, do you have anything to add, I think, to our presentation?
Sure. Just one quick point. One of the important things for us has been taking the resources that are dedicated to housing right now and implementing them in a way that's sustainable, both within our agency activities and for our buyers and homeowners. A lot of our focus is making sure that where we create equity, that it's going to last, and just making sure that we are targeting resources in a sustainable way. And that's something that's critical, because while there's money today, we all know that topic du jour can become something that people aren't worried about 5 years from now. And so making sure that housing remains a priority is so crucial.
Thank you. And Adam, I think, final word, especially I think you discussed lots of different options. So which one would you think, I think, might be more effective in protecting homeowners?
Well, I think that really you do kind of want to layer different policies on top of each other to target specific issues. If I was pressed, the very first recommendation would be to look into implementing an effective circuit breaker program to help homeowners paying the heaviest share of their income and property taxes. And again, I would just underline the importance of being careful with designing tax relief, avoiding these like really broad brush programs that can end up creating a lot of new problems. And so I barely scratched the surface of relief options, but I highly recommend checking out the report linked to in the chat. So thank you.
Yeah. I think all of you, I think, for your presentations and the participation. And thank you, I think, for your interest in this very important topic. And we will share, I think, the recording of the webinar, and also we will write a write-up or summary based on, I think, the events we already hosted, and we will share with you, I think, shortly. Again, I think you can see, I think, the survey, I think, either I think in the chat or you will receive in the email. Thank you again, and have a good afternoon.